Two men pretending to be HOA cops pulled a gun on a quiet father unloading groceries. What they didn't know was he's Delta Force, and he was trained for moments just like this. The paper bag tore just as Torrance Miles was locking the back of his SUV. A carton of eggs tumbled out and cracked on the driveway. He let out a breath, tired but not annoyed. Just another thing in a long list of small messes he'd have to clean up since coming home. "Don't worry, Daddy. I'll help you," said Kennedy, his 7-year-old daughter, skipping out of the garage barefoot. She knelt beside him, scooping up a couple of lemons that had rolled under the bumper. "Careful," he said gently. "Don't cut your hands." "Go grab the broom." She nodded and ran back toward the garage, her little pigtails bouncing behind her. It was late morning in Somerville, South Carolina, one of those planned suburban neighborhoods with speed bumps every few blocks and lawns manicured like magazine covers. Most people stayed inside on Sundays. Church, brunch, naps. Quiet. That's why Torrance had picked this area when he moved his family here 5 months ago. Security. Stability. It was what Kennedy needed. What he needed, too. He stood up, rubbing his back, when he noticed a dusty silver SUV rolling slowly down the block. No plates on the front. The windows were tinted dark, but he caught the outline of 2 men inside. They weren't from the neighborhood. He knew that without even thinking. The SUV came to a slow stop just past his driveway. Both doors opened. 2 white men got out. Mid-40s, broad-shouldered, matching tactical vests with HOA security stitched in bold across the front. No name tags, no company logos, no badges. "Morning," the taller one said, voice hard and clipped. "Can we help you?" Torrance blinked. "I live here." "Yeah?" the shorter one said, glancing at the groceries on the ground. "Got ID?" Torrance raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" "ID. Proof you live here," the tall one repeated, stepping closer. "We've had some complaints." "Complaints?" Torrance asked. "About what, exactly?" "Suspicious activity," the short one answered, folding his arms. "Someone matching your description. Been walking around properties that aren't theirs. Ring doorbells don't lie." Torrance exhaled slowly through his nose, keeping his voice level. "Gentlemen, I just got back from Fort Campbell yesterday. That's my daughter inside. This is my house. I don't need to prove that to anyone, especially not 2 men I don't recognize." The taller one smirked. "Funny. You don't look like military." That was it. Not even subtle. Just out there. Torrance didn't answer. He tilted his head slightly, watching their eyes. The short one shifted his stance a little, feet bracing, hand drifting near his waistband. "Look, I don't want trouble," Torrance said, still calm. "You say you're HOA security? Where's your badge? Your license? Name?" The short one cut in. "Don't turn this around on us. You're the one acting nervous." "I'm not nervous," Torrance said evenly. "I'm being cautious. There's a difference." At that moment, Kennedy came out of the garage holding the broom in both hands. "Daddy, where do you want—" she started, then froze. Her eyes landed on the 2 men. Torrance stepped between them and his daughter in a single, quiet motion. "Go inside, sweetheart." She hesitated. "But now." She obeyed, eyes wide. The tall man snorted. "You teaching her to run from questions too?" Torrance didn't answer. He just bent down and picked up the phone from the driver's seat where he'd left it. "Smile," he said. "You're being recorded now." That was when everything shifted. The short one stepped forward, hand now clearly resting on the grip of a sidearm tucked into his waistband. No holster, no security gear. Just a plain black handgun. "You need to stop filming right now," he snapped. Torrance stared at him. Calm. Unblinking. He didn't move. The tall one spoke again. "We asked nicely, but now it looks like you're hiding something." But Torrance wasn't hiding a thing. He was waiting. And that wait was about to end. The phone stayed steady in Torrance's hand, its camera angled upward just enough to catch both men's faces. The shorter one still hadn't moved his hand off the gun, His shirt had ridden up slightly, exposing the weapon now in full view. Torrance kept his voice low. You just pulled a firearm on a man standing in his own driveway, in front of his child. You sure you want to keep going? The taller man took a small step forward, gesturing toward the house. We've had thefts in this community. Mailboxes rifled through. Packages taken. People walking the streets who don't live here. So, yeah, we want to know what you're doing here, and why your kid's barefoot in a garage full of moving boxes. Torrance tilted his head, disbelief flashing through his eyes. That's what this is about? You think I'm some porch pirate in gym shorts and a wrinkled t-shirt, holding a bag of bananas and a kid's broom? The taller man shrugged. Could be a cover. You serious? Torrance asked, still not raising his voice. You think that's what this looks like? The short one chimed in, tapping his chest where the HOA security patch sat. We don't have to explain ourselves. This community gave us the right to confront suspicious activity. We've got full support from the board. Torrance narrowed his eyes. I've been to every HOA meeting since I got here. Never seen either of you. That hit a nerve. The short one's nostrils flared. Don't get smart. No? Torrance said slowly. I'm being factual. There are laws about impersonating law enforcement, and you're two grown men, with no IDs, in fake vests, drawing weapons on residents. So either call someone real, or get off my property. The man with the gun took another step. You don't tell me what to do. Torrance's fingers gripped the phone tighter. You're escalating in front of a minor, and you're being recorded. The taller man tried to pivot. You're the one who's being difficult. If you just showed us something, license, lease, whatever, this wouldn't even be an issue. Torrance stared at him. You mean if I played along? If I acted submissive? Let you feel powerful? Neither man answered. Torrance took one step forward. Controlled. Deliberate. You didn't stop that minivan across the street, or the guy jogging with his Labrador 3 doors down. You didn't ask them for ID. I wonder why. The short one's hand tensed. Back up, but Torrance didn't flinch. You pulled a gun. On a man holding bananas. Then a voice echoed across the lawn. Everything all right over there? It was Mrs. Renee Holloway, the retired school principal who lived 2 doors down. She stood on her porch in a housecoat, holding a coffee mug and squinting toward the confrontation. The taller man glanced her way and put on a smile. Just checking in, ma'am. Routine HOA security. Mrs. Holloway frowned. Since when? That was enough. Torrance saw the shift, the doubt creeping into the man's face. The act was cracking. Another voice joined in. Torrance, you need help. It was Jeremy Lynn, a nurse practitioner from across the street, standing at the end of his driveway holding a trash bag. His tone was casual, but his eyes were locked on the 2 men. He wasn't just asking. He was ready. Torrance didn't answer, but he gave the smallest nod, just enough. The taller man looked at his partner. Let's go, he muttered. But the one with the gun wasn't ready to back down. Not until we get some ID? You think you're special or something? Torrance's voice hardened, quiet and firm. I think you're about to lose more than your temp job. Then from somewhere behind the row of houses, a siren began to wail. Faint at first, then closer. Jeremy spoke again, louder this time. Already called the sheriff's department. They'll be here in 2 minutes. The taller man turned toward the SUV. Now, man, let's go. But the short one hesitated, staring at Torrance like he was still trying to figure out the puzzle. You don't act scared, he said. Torrance stepped forward again. That's because I'm not. But the look in Torrance's eyes didn't come from anger. It came from training, and they'd just pushed the wrong man too far. The SUV door slammed shut, but the shorter man didn't follow. He stood there, fingers twitching over the grip of his gun like he was trying to decide if he still had control or if he'd already lost it. Torrance never broke eye contact. The sirens were getting louder now, weaving through the subdivision's narrow streets. They weren't far, but in a moment like this, seconds feel like minutes, and one wrong twitch could turn everything sideways. Torrance's phone was still filming, held low but angled just enough. He didn't need dramatic shots. He needed facts. Proof. Witnesses. He knew how these things could go, how quickly stories twisted. "Last chance," he said, voice level. "Put the weapon down and step off my property." The man's lips curled. "You threatening me?" "No," Torrance replied. "I'm warning you. There's a difference." That pause stretched long and taut. The man looked at Torrance, then toward the sidewalk, then back again. His fingers tapped twice on the grip, but he didn't draw. Not yet. Then, just behind Torrance, came the soft creak of the screen door. Kennedy was peeking out, her little face barely visible. "Daddy?" she called, voice small. "What's happening?" "Stay inside, baby girl," Torrance said without looking. "It's all right." It wasn't all right, but he said it anyway. Because that's what you do when you're the only calm one in the room. The man with the gun took a breath. "I don't get you, man. You act like you're untouchable. Like you've done this before." Torrance's jaw tightened. "Because I have." That landed like a punch. The shorter man blinked, confused. Like something about the moment had shifted, but he couldn't quite name it. "See," Torrance continued, slow and deliberate. "I've spent my adult life in places where guys like you didn't pretend to carry authority. They had it. And they still weren't half as reckless." That stopped him cold. "You military?" the man asked, tone suddenly uncertain. Torrance didn't answer with words. He pulled his wallet from his back pocket, never lifting the phone, never looking away from the man. With one smooth motion, he flipped it open and held it at chest level. Just enough to flash the ID without giving anything away on camera. The shorter man leaned in, squinted, and stepped back. Just like that. "You gotta be kidding me," he muttered, almost to himself. Torrance's voice dropped even lower. "So now you know who I am. The question is, who the hell are you?" No answer. Then the squad car appeared around the corner, lights flashing, siren fading. It rolled to a quick stop at the curb, and two deputies stepped out, one older, balding, with a clipboard, the other younger, scanning the scene fast. The moment the younger one spotted the gun in the man's waistband, he shouted, "Hands where we can see them!" The short man hesitated, but raised his arms slowly. The taller man, already by the SUV, stepped forward, trying to play it cool. "We're HOA security, volunteers. We had reports of—" "Let me stop you right there," said the older deputy, stepping in. "Do you have identification? Company credentials? Any legal authority?" The taller man reached for his vest pocket. "We got HOA authorization." "That's not the question," the deputy snapped. "Real ID, guard license, gun permit." The short man's hands were still up, his face pale. "We were just trying to—" "Save it," the younger deputy said, already unholstering his cuffs. "You drew a firearm. That's all I need to hear." Kennedy was still watching from the porch, wide-eyed. "Stay with me, baby," Torrance called softly. The deputy looked at Torrance, then at his ID. The shift in his tone was immediate. "Mr. Miles," he said with a respectful nod. "You all right, sir?" "I am now," Torrance said. But what came next wasn't just about justice. It was about exposure. And the fallout was just beginning. It was a strange thing, standing in your own driveway surrounded by police cars, neighbors whispering behind screen doors, and two grown men in tactical vests sitting handcuffed on the curb like teenagers who got caught spray painting a wall. Torrance stood a few feet back, arms crossed, silent. His groceries were still scattered near his feet. Eggs cracked, bread flattened, milk slowly leaking from a puncture in the carton. It almost looked comical, if the weight of what just happened weren't pressing down on everyone watching. The younger deputy, Officer Sean O'Reilly, was walking back and forth, getting statements from both men. His partner, Sergeant Dale Kinney, stood beside Torrance, notebook in hand. "You say they never identified themselves officially?" Kinney asked. "No badges, no names, just fake vests and a lot of attitude," Torrance replied. "Claim to be HOA security, but I've never seen either of them at a single board meeting." Kinney scribbled something. "And they asked for ID? Demanded it. Accused me of trespassing. Said I didn't look like I lived here." Kinney looked up, met Torrance's eyes. "Said that word for word?" "No. Torrance said plainly. But you don't need subtitles when someone says it with their whole body. The sergeant didn't write that part down, but he didn't have to. The meaning hung between them. Your phone still recording? He asked. Torrance nodded. Everything, from the moment they got out of the car. Kinney held out his hand. Mind if I have a copy? I'll airdrop it to you. Keep the original. Kinney nodded. Smart. At that moment, a small voice broke the quiet. Daddy? Kennedy called again, peeking from the porch steps. Torrance waved her over this time. Come on, kiddo. She ran toward him, bare feet slapping softly against the pavement. When she reached him, she wrapped her arms around his waist and didn't let go. Officer O'Reilly approached the group. The guy with the guns got no license for concealed carry. Said he bought it at a pawn shop 2 years ago. Kinney sighed. Figures. The taller one saying they were granted informal enforcement power by a couple board members. O'Reilly added. But no written agreement, no contracts, just a verbal go-ahead to keep the neighborhood safe. That's not how authority works. Torrance said, more to himself than anyone else. O'Reilly turned toward him. You pressing charges? Torrance looked down at Kennedy, still clinging to his side, then back at the two men on the curb, eyes down, silent now that they'd lost the stage. I want them prosecuted for impersonating law enforcement, he said. And I want the HOA held accountable if they knew about this and said nothing. Kinney nodded. We'll get the paperwork started. By now, a crowd had formed. Neighbors with bathrobes, coffee mugs, dogs on leashes pretending to take casual walks. Everyone had heard the sirens and come to see what happened. From the edge of the sidewalk, Jeremy Lin stepped forward. I got the whole thing on my Ring camera too, he said. And I'm happy to give a statement. Appreciated, O'Reilly replied. Appreciated, Torrance echoed, giving Jeremy a firm nod. A woman's voice piped up from the crowd. He shouldn't have had to go through that. Not here. And just like that, the whispers began. The story was already being told, neighbor to neighbor, front porch to front porch. Torrance could feel it moving, picking up momentum. Not just the shock of what happened, but the realization that it happened here, on their street, to someone they saw every week. Officer O'Reilly glanced back at the two detained men. We'll be contacting the HOA next. I have a feeling they're going to have a lot of explaining to do. Torrance sighed. They better. Because if this happened to me, it can happen to someone else. And next time, maybe the guy's not trained to stay calm. Maybe he reaches for something in his pocket. And maybe someone doesn't walk away. Kennedy tugged at his shirt. Can we go inside now? He smiled softly. Yeah, baby. Let's go wash the driveway off. But what should have ended with soap and silence was just beginning to ripple outward. And the next knock on his door wouldn't come from the police. It was 2 days later when the knock came. Torrance had just put Kennedy to bed after their usual evening routine. Story time. Light off, night light on. He was in the kitchen, rinsing dishes, when the sound echoed through the house. Not loud, not urgent, but intentional. He wiped his hands on a towel, walked to the door, and checked the peephole. A man in a blazer stood on the front step, holding what looked like a leather folder under one arm. Mid-50s, salt and pepper hair, trim build. Standing alone. Torrance opened the door halfway. Can I help you? The man offered a quick nod. Mr. Miles? My name's Leon Berenger, Internal Affairs Division, Berkeley County Sheriff's Office. Mind if I have a few minutes? Torrance looked him over. Real ID badge, official folder, government issue shoes. Not the type to knock without reason. He opened the door wider. Come in. Leon stepped inside, glancing briefly around the living room. His eyes didn't linger. He wasn't casing the place, just taking mental notes like someone used to reading people quickly. I appreciate your time, he said, sitting down on the edge of the couch. I reviewed the footage. Both yours and the neighbor's Ring cam. And? Leon's brow tightened. It's worse than we thought. Torrance leaned against the counter, arms folded. How so? Those two men, Alan Reams and Curtis Yelverton, aren't just random volunteers. Turns out they've done this before. 3 different times in the past 6 months, in other neighborhoods nearby. Always the same setup. Fake HOA gear. Vague stories about community protection, targeting homeowners they didn't recognize. Always homeowners that look like me? Torrance asked flatly. Leon didn't dodge the question. In all 3 incidents, yes. All black. 2 of them ended with 911 calls. But no weapons were drawn. You're the first. Torrance blew out a slow breath through his nose. They ever face charges? Nope. People just wanted the problem to go away. Didn't want the noise. Didn't want the neighborhood name on the news. But now they're charged? Torrance asked. Leon nodded. Multiple counts. Impersonating law enforcement. Unlawful carry. Attempted intimidation. We're pushing it hard, especially now that the footage is public. Torrance's eyes narrowed slightly. Public? Leon hesitated. It leaked. The ring footage got passed around. Someone from the HOA sent it to a cousin, and it ended up on social media. Local station picked it up. And now, it's moving fast. Torrance sat down, suddenly aware of the weight behind his shoulders. What's the HOA saying? They're scrambling. Leon replied, claiming they never officially authorized anything. Some members knew, but nothing was documented. No vote, no record. Just a couple of board members giving nods behind closed doors. Torrance clenched his jaw. And now they're pretending they had no idea. Leon pulled a small folder from his briefcase and set it on the table. Inside were printed screenshots of HOA group texts. One message read, "Let Alan and Curtis handle it. They'll make sure the new guy isn't a problem." Is that from before the incident? Torrance asked. Leon nodded. 4 days before. Same number that sent it was registered to Sondra Pelham, the current HOA vice president. Torrance rubbed his forehead, quiet for a long beat. So they were targeting me. Looks that way. He stood and walked toward the living room window. The night outside was still. Porch lights on. A neighbor's flag rustling gently in the breeze. Nothing out of place. But it all looked different now. Leon stood up behind him. Mr. Miles, I know you've seen worse than this. Overseas. In uniform. But this is here. This is home. I know, Torrance said. That's what makes it worse. Leon nodded. We're preparing to make a public statement tomorrow. Sheriff's office is going to release the full report and recommend that the HOA leadership step down. Torrance turned toward him. They should. Leon walked toward the door, pausing just before he left. There's something else. What? You've got a lot of support building. People are talking. Your story hit a nerve. Local news wants an interview. So does a national podcast. They want to hear your side. Torrance didn't answer right away. But he knew the next chapter wasn't just about what happened in his driveway. It was about what people did with the truth now that they had it. The following morning, Torrance sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, a fresh cup of coffee going cold beside him. He wasn't reading the news. He was in the news. Headline after headline. Homeowner confronted by fake HOA cops. Turns out he's active duty special forces. Somerville man records. Terrifying encounter with armed imposters. Delta operator targeted in HOA power play. Footage goes viral. Each one told some version of the story, though most didn't get it right. They focused on the gotcha moment, the fact that Torrance was military, the twist where the men got cuffed. But almost none of them talked about Kennedy, or the way her voice cracked when she called for him from the porch, or the way she hadn't slept through the night since. Torrance closed the laptop. He wasn't looking for a spotlight. He didn't care about viral clips or retweets. What kept replaying in his head wasn't the video. It was the what-ifs. What if Kennedy had stepped outside just 10 seconds earlier? What if one of the men had panicked when he pulled his phone? What if the neighbors hadn't spoken up? The doorbell rang. He opened it to find Renee Holloway, the retired principal, holding a pie dish with a tin foil cover. She wore the same kind eyes as the morning of the incident, but this time they held more. "Made you a sweet potato pie," she said. "Figured you could use something that tastes like kindness." Torrance smiled faintly. "Thanks, Ms. Holloway." She hesitated, then added, "I'm sorry I didn't do more when it was happening. I saw it and I froze." "You spoke up," he said. "That mattered." Renee nodded, visibly relieved. "We had an emergency board meeting last night. Big turnout. You shook this place up, Mr. Miles. In a good way. Did they say anything about stepping down?" 3 of them already did. The rest will follow. After she left, the messages started coming in. Old friends from his unit, a teacher from high school, his old platoon sergeant from Fort Hood. People who hadn't reached out in years were texting things like, "I saw the clip, proud of how you handled it," or "That could have ended so much worse." It felt strange, being praised for not reacting, for staying calm, for not using everything he'd been trained to do. Later that afternoon, a small press conference was held outside the sheriff's department. Sheriff Brendan Amos stood behind a podium, flanked by deputies and flustered city council members. Cameras flashed. Reporters murmured. The individuals who posed as security personnel acted outside any legal authority, the sheriff said. "We're pursuing criminal charges. The behavior seen in the footage is not just unacceptable, it's dangerous." When asked if race was a factor, the sheriff paused. Then he said, "Watch the footage and decide for yourself. Sometimes what people don't say out loud says the most." That line got quoted everywhere. By nightfall, Torrance's name was trending locally, not because he wanted it to be, but because people couldn't stop talking about how calm he stayed, how close it had come to disaster, and how easily it could happen to anyone. Kennedy sat on the floor beside him, coloring. She'd drawn a house with a big tree and a stick figure version of her dad holding her hand. "Daddy," she said, looking up. "Those men aren't coming back, right?" "No," he said gently. "They're not." She nodded and kept coloring. Quiet again. That night, Torrance stood in the backyard, staring out into the dark, hands in his pockets. The sounds of the neighborhood were the same. Dogs barking in the distance, sprinklers kicking on, someone watching TV too loud through an open window. But something underneath it had shifted. People were aware now, not just of what had happened, but of what could happen if nobody spoke up. He wasn't the first to be targeted. He probably wouldn't be the last, but maybe, because this time someone said something, the next person wouldn't have to carry it alone. But Torrance also knew stories like this couldn't just go viral and fade. They had to leave something behind. Something real. The following week, Torrance finally sat down in front of the small camera perched on his bookshelf. It wasn't a fancy setup, just his laptop, a mic clipped to his shirt, and Kennedy upstairs watching a cartoon with the volume low. He waited until the house was still. Then, he hit record. His face filled the frame. Tired, honest, steady. "I wasn't going to say anything publicly," he began. "At least, not like this. I figured the footage spoke for itself. But after the past few days, the messages, the calls, the interviews, I realized something." He paused, glanced down, then back up. "There are a lot of people who still don't understand how fast something simple can turn dangerous. How a man can be unloading groceries with his kid one second and have a gun in his face the next, for no reason except someone decided he didn't look like he belonged." He leaned forward slightly, hands clasped. "I'm not sharing this for sympathy. I'm not angry. I'm tired. Tired of pretending these things are isolated. Tired of people whispering, 'He handled it well.' Like that should be the headline. What does that even mean? That I didn't yell? That I didn't reach? That I didn't die?" His voice never wavered, but the silence afterward sat heavy. "I handled it well because I had no other option. Because my daughter was standing 10 feet away. Because I've spent the last 15 years in places where you don't get second chances. You train to stay calm, to control the adrenaline, to outthink the threat." Another pause. "But that's not a skill every man should have to develop just to live peacefully in his neighborhood." Torrance glanced off-screen for a moment, then looked back. "I've been asked a lot in the past few days what people can do, how to make things better. And the truth is, I don't have a perfect answer. But I know this. It starts with listening. Not just hearing, but really listening. When someone says something feels off or wrong or unfair, don't wait for proof. Don't wait for a video. He gestured slightly, his hands calm. Speak up. Like Jeremy did across the street. Like Ms. Holloway did from her porch. They didn't have to throw a punch or make a speech. They just said something. And sometimes that's enough to tip the balance. He let that sit for a few seconds. Then, finally, he leaned back in the chair. I'm not proud of what happened. I'm not glad it went viral. But if this whole thing helps one person stop and think before they assume, or helps one kid sleep easier knowing their dad came home safe, then maybe something good comes out of it. The video ended simply. No music, no graphics, just a fade to black. Within hours it was being shared across platforms, not because it was dramatic, but because it was honest, real, and people listened. That weekend, the HOA held a community gathering in the clubhouse lawn. Not a formal meeting, just neighbors coming together. Apologies were exchanged. Policies were reviewed. They agreed to stop all informal security programs until further notice. One neighbor, an older man Torrance barely knew, stood up during the circle and said, "If we have to be taught what belonging looks like, then we're already behind." Torrance didn't respond. He didn't have to. Kennedy stood next to him holding his hand. Her shoes were on this time, and she smiled up at him like none of it ever touched her. In the days that followed, things slowly returned to normal. Groceries, school drop-offs, morning walks, but there was a difference. People waved more. They made eye contact. They didn't just see Torrance as the guy who went viral. They saw him. And maybe that's what changes things in the long run. Not headlines, not outrage, but real human connection. The kind that sticks around after the cameras turn off. Because sometimes the strongest kind of power isn't force. It's presence. It's standing your ground without raising your voice. It's protecting your child without pulling a trigger. It's telling your story so others don't have to live it. And that story doesn't end when the footage stops. It begins with what we choose to do next. If this story made you think, even for a second, don't let it stop there. Speak up, ask questions, stay aware, and subscribe for more stories that matter.